All right, so um, we've got this really interesting situation brewing around Trump, interviews, the election, and what might be going on behind the scenes. We're going to be looking at this Politico report, and it's claiming that uh, Trump is exhausted. Like, he's avoiding interviews, especially in these final election weeks. And it's like, was that really true?
What's fascinating is how this, seemingly minor thing, a maybe awkward interview, turns into this whole discussion about the election itself.
It's like we're watching a campaign strategy maybe unfold live.
Right.
So we have Politico over here saying Trump's tired, dodging interviews.
Mm.
But then we see this interview he did with Dan Bongino, and it ends kind of abruptly. So is this a sign of that exhaustion or like something else entirely?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? And to unpack it, you got to remember Bongino is openly pro-Trump. He even introduces his audience to Trump as the darkest MAGA of all, right at the start of the interview.
Which, yeah, adds a whole other layer to this whole
Oh,
thing.
absolutely.
So for this deep dive, we're really trying to figure out, do these two things, the Political report and this Bongino interview, like, do they go together? Do they clash? Or is there a bigger story here about the election that we're missing?
And that's where, knowing the players is key. So you've got Trump, right? Former president, known for doing things his own way, especially with the media. And then there's Bongino, and his background is a whole other story.
Yeah, he's been an NYPD officer, Secret Service, then a commentator, even ran for Congress a few times. And now he's got this big platform on Rumble.
And that journey matters, right? It shows a certain savviness, building a very specific audience. Like his law enforcement past gives him this air of authority, especially to his target audience. Then you add the Fox News departure, the COVID stances. There's a pattern here of aligning with a very specific type of conservatism.
Okay, so going into this interview, things aren't exactly neutral, right? Not that every interview has to be, but it's something to keep in mind as we break down what happened. This interview took place at Trump Tower, streamed live on Bongino's show, and the article we're looking at, it describes the interview as low energy, which is interesting given how Bongino hypes up his audience.
Right, and that contrast, the hyped audience and then Trump's reported demeanor, it's something to consider. Was it actual fatigue or, and this is just a thought, a way to appear more, subdued on purpose given Bongino's platform? It's tough to say without both sides being totally open about it. But it is interesting that Bongino wants to pretend nothing happened. Admitting Trump maybe cut it short, especially with Politico saying he's exhausted, that doesn't help the story Bongino's pushing.
It's like we're watching this game of political chess, trying to guess everyone's next move.
Yeah.
So what do you think? Does this back up what Politico is saying about Trump's campaign style now?
It could, yeah. We know Trump does media his way, and this might just be another example. He's big on rallies, talking directly to his base, not so much these sit-down interviews, especially if they seem like they'll be tough on him.
And Bongino's definitely not going to be tough when it comes to Trump.
Right, exactly. So was this planned? Control the message? Talk to a specific audience that already likes him? Or was he just beat from the campaign trail? Hard to say without being inside the strategy meetings.
Which is what makes this so interesting. We're stuck with these little public moments, trying to piece together the whole picture. And speaking of public moments, there's this one quote from the interview that really stuck out to me. Trump's talking about Harvey Weinstein, and he seems surprised at how it all went down, and he uses the term, he says, schlonged.
Yeah, that's interesting word choice. Not just because it's spelled,
Yeah.
but it shows how Trump falls back on this certain type of talk, even in a setting like this, even with friendly face on a platform that likes him. He still goes there, and boom, headlines, controversy.
It's almost like he can't help himself.
Maybe. Or it's calculated. Appeal to a certain part of his base who liked that, the not holding back, the defiance of it all. We're back to guessing his intent, which is always tricky in politics.
For sure. So we've got the interview. It ends early. Nobody agrees on why. And then, bam, schlonged. Just throws a wrench in the whole thing. It's like a puzzle where the pieces keep changing.
Welcome to media in 2024, right? Everything's all over the place, moving fast, hard to tell what's real and what's strategy.
So where do we even begin to unpack this?
Start by admitting we don't know everything, right? We can't get inside Trump's head, know why he ended it or said that word, but we can look at what's around it all, who's involved, what their motives might be, that kind of thing.
And that's what makes this so fascinating. It's not just one interview. It's about how these stories get made, how we understand what's happening, how these little moments build up to an election.
Exactly. And whether it was on purpose or not, this interview shows us how politics work now. It's all about understanding the media, the message, these platforms everyone's using.
It also makes you realize how important it is to, really pay attention, you know?
100%. Can't just read a headline and think you know it all. You got to dig deeper, be aware of your own biases, look at it from different angles. This whole Trump Bongino thing is perfect for that.
Okay, so back to our original question. Does this interview make you believe Politico more?
hmm
Like, was Trump really exhausted avoiding interviews?
It's possible, but it's just as possible that this was all part of the plan, you know? Keep his message tight, don't risk tough questions.
Or, and maybe this is crazy, but could it be both?
Absolutely. That's the thing. It's complicated.
Okay, so how much does Bongino, being Bongino, his whole background, his platform, how much does that change how we see this whole thing?
That's the million-dollar question, and I think the answer is a lot.
It's like he sets the stage right, darkest maguey, and suddenly everyone watching sees the interview through that lens, no matter what Trump actually says.
Exactly. And, you know, this whole thing, win or lose for either of them, it shows how easily these narratives get made, how information gets twisted, especially during an election. Like, we can't just sit back and take it all in, you know?
We got to be like super critical thinkers now.
Absolutely. Every platform, every commentator, even the news, they've all got their own thing going on, their own goals.
So then what do? How do we even start to make sense of it all without getting totally lost?
Start with what we've been talking about, right? Question everything, look for proof. And the biggest thing, be open to being wrong. Like, maybe your first take on something. Maybe it wasn't the whole story.
So we're all fact checkers now, huh?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Check things out, find different viewpoints, and don't be afraid to change your mind if you learn something new.
So to wrap this whole thing up, this whole strange interview situation,
hmm
what's the one thing you hope people really take away from this?
Don't just take things at face value, you know? Everything's connected to something bigger. The more we understand that, who the players are, what they want, these platforms, the better we are at knowing what's real, what's fake, especially when it comes to voting.
Yeah, think of it like your duty as a citizen is to be smart about the information you're getting. Well, that's all the time we have for this deep dive. But here's something to think about. If something as small as this interview can cause this whole big discussion, what does that say about information in the world today? Until next time, stay curious, keep asking questions, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.